So your question is for the service centre in Hornby with a 4.6...
So now, Hornby, yes.
With a 4.6 million and 13-14's been carried forward to 14-15?
Yes.
Okay.
It's automatically
Yes.
carried forward.
I believe the answer is yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's true, but 2014-15, they still have a $5.4 million. If accumulated together, almost $10 million. However, right now, the progress behind the schedule, how much the budget you will put into the next year, 2014 and 15.
So you're asking whether it's added together to be 10
Yes.
million in
10 million.
14-15, or whether it's pushed
Yeah,
out
yeah,
the other
yeah.
5.6, 5.4?
Yeah.
The answer would depend on the project manager's assessment of how long it will take to complete the project. So if he believes it can be completed in this 14-15 year, the budget will all be there to meet it.
So at the moment, not yet. No, this information, not yet.
Well, it's part of what is done at year end. Once we've worked out what has been finished for the year, the projects are moved forward and brought back to council at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yanni?
So, thank you for the Mayor for giving us a really comprehensive overview and understanding of how we got into a 3-year plan process. I note that one of the resolutions was that, obviously the cost share should be done by end of April 2013, and it wasn't. Given the concern that people have had in our community over our financial position, is it envisaged that this plan will be audited? And if not, what would be to stop us from getting it audited?
The annual plan will be audited?
The annual plan has been partially audited in preparation for the long-term plan. Not the full complete audit that you would normally expect, but as part of the long-term plan and as part of auditing the annual report, auditors have looked at aspects of the annual plan.
Have we got the auditor's opinion or advice? Like
No.
normally we would have as part of an annual plan a letter from the auditor that would say we've audited it and these are the concerns, or this is the
The
clean bill of
annual
health?
plan or the long-term
Yeah,
plan?
annual plan.
Because we will have to have a full audit for the long-term plan, which will be, forgive me for not knowing, but I'm assuming that the audit is done prior to the long-term plan going out for public consultation.
It is.
So we'll be sending all of our records to the auditors in this coming financial year.
That's right.
And that obviously they'll have to report to us before Christmas. If we're going to include it in a public consultation or shortly after Christmas.
It doesn't so much get a certificate like the annual report does, but part of the process is they do report back, so they'll come back to the Risk and Audit Committee on their findings. And as I said, because in preparation for that, because of the flow-on effect of an annual plan into a long-term plan, they have had a look at aspects of this year's annual plan, the one we're discussing here.
So should we ask them to report to Risk and
Well,
Audit?
I don't think there'll be enough. They've only considered aspects of it, not all of it. Can I just defer to Peter Ryan? There was a brief report, wasn't there, that we've seen?
There was in relation to some very small items around levels of service.
Yes.
No New Zealand Council does an audit report on an annual plan, but they do a very detailed opinion, as they call it, on the long-term plan, which must be in the draft
Yep.
and signed by them.
Right, and so that goes out with the public consultation? Yeah. So the reason that I mention this is that, because I just feel that we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. We're in year 2 of a 3-year plan that really never intended to have a 3rd year. Would that be a fair assumption?
That is correct. But each year, when you do the long-term plan,
That's the beginning of that's the first year. That's your annual plan for the first year of the long-term plan.
that's right. And the second year would be the equivalent of the second year. The third year never becomes anything either. It gets merged into the first year of the following long-term plan. So in each long-term plan, although it's a 10-year plan, it's only ever the first 2 years that are actually plans for functioning.
Right.
Yes, that what I was trying to understand is we essentially get no we get no independent audit of the 3-year plan
That's
at all,
right.
ever.
Well,
No,
we
that's
didn't,
exactly
but I think that your council did, the previous
It was a
council
financial
did
strategy.
actually ask for a, it wasn't a full audit, and we did receive that. Yeah.
Around the financial strategy. So I just wondered, does that get updated as we go through and changes?
Not as a normal
No.
course of events, and I would be reluctant to add the additional cost of an audit to a process which will be fully guided by the audit provisions as we go into the long-term plan. I really want people to get the idea that this is just, you know, it is just a stepping stone to where we really need to be, which is the long-term planning process, which is why I don't buy the argument of building the 1.2% into the base rate, because if we do that, we take the pressure off in terms of the organisation to find the savings that we need to find.
I just find it really hard for people because we've had a lot of submissions around things that are not, there's no detail in here over where we're spending the most amount of money in the next year, and I think it's, or 2 years. So it's really hard for people to know how they can influence that. But I just wanted to come back to the stadium.
Well, hang on,
Can I
no,
cover off
when the
the
draft
audit?
went out, it had all of the, it had a pie chart.
It didn't have the cost share, it didn't have the anchor projects, it didn't have the indicative 9-year capital program, it didn't have the
But
things.
this is an annual plan, Yanni. We're tracked between a 3-year plan and a long-year plan. So I think it's a bit unfair to sort of kind of say that we haven't given people, you know, what we couldn't possibly give them. It's not possible in a 1-year plan situation.
Right.
All of this will be out in the public arena for a very comprehensive discussion about how we recommend as a council how we get to the 10-year, the long-term plan. That is when we are going to have the really hard decisions and the really big debates.
Yeah, but I appreciate that. But there's a window, there's a 12-month window where 384 million is going to be spent, that the community have made submissions to us during this process over where they think it should be spent or what they think it shouldn't be spent on, that we don't seem to have any ability to make changes. And if I take,
That's right. We don't have the ability to make changes, unilateral changes to the cost share agreement. So can I just take that off the table?
Okay.
Because we're not going to have that discussion here and now. There are things that we can change, there are things that we can't change, and that's one of the things that we can't
so the
change.
Stadium Trust, the submission we heard from the Stadium Trust where they wanted, I think it was about 4 million to extend the temporary life of the stadium that currently exists. Why have staff not recommended that we contribute funding to that?
Okay. First, I want to cover off the audit point. The Audit Office will be auditing our year as it finishes. They'll do a comprehensive look back on the year that's been to make sure that it's financially rigorous. So that's the normal critique you have from an audit body is, you know, how are you going with your previous year rather than looking forward. Also, they very distinctly have a clear line of reporting in directly through to the Audit Risk and Management Committee. So we are held to account very clearly by them, as you'd expect. With regard to the Stadium Trust, from memory it was $2 million they were requesting for the purchase of temporary seats. The rationale behind not necessarily wanting to support that, some factors came into play, such as it's not our stadium or our choice around delay. The benefit of delay does not accrue to council. Also, additionally, there is some contention around monies owed from the Stadium Trust. They still have a number of payments that they need to make to us that has not yet been cleared up. So those factors came into consideration around it's not our stadium, the benefits of delay do not accrue to us. We need to sort out payment from them to us before we would go any further. So those were the factors that came into play around that decision or recommendation.
But it seems to me we have quite a big benefit if we have a temporary stadium for the last 10 years. And we've got 250 million on budget. So
I think it goes back to the cost share arrangement and the unilateral ability to change the stadium timing.
okay. The second question was we had quite a detailed submission in terms of fees and charges that hasn't been picked up. It was the Burnside Rugby Club, I think, over the sports fields, and I just wondered why it seemed a pretty straightforward request. It was really probably almost at a semantic level around the charges of organised team activities for sevens, and it was quite high, and I just wondered why we hadn't captured in there, or whether we could ask staff to relook at that. There's no reflection in here about that.
I don't know. I assume that you've got an amendment to cover that. So, Jamie?
Okay. Or can I just ask another question then over the library's library's opening hours? We asked for information. How much would it cost to restore the library? Have we had information around that? Restoring the library hours to what they currently are?
Okay. Yes, we've had a quick look at that. It appears to be around $94,000, which is around 0.03% of rates from
0.03%. And
thereabouts.
And in terms of the civic building, the problem I'm having is trying to understand why the civic building can open for an extra half an hour without any cost, but the libraries can't open as they currently are.
The report spells that out. It says they've just readjusted staff hours in consultation with the staff.
So could we not
People
do
were
that for
in the
libraries?
building from 7 o'clock in the morning
Okay.
every day, I know. Jamie?
Thanks. Morning. This is just really a matter of process. For the items that have been signalled throughout the annual plan consultation to rebuild or repair better than before, I guess in a commercial setting you'd be having your capex in your annual budget, and this is effectively our budget. But for things like this, it would seem that the best place for that would be from the fund that's been set up for betterment for exactly that purpose. Does that need to be signalled throughout this annual plan process, or would you simply deal with it when that arose and then take that from the betterment fund, or does it actually need to be articulated in this annual plan when we sign it off?
My opinion on that is it's something that can be done and should be done outside of the annual plan. It's more of a prioritisation call and examination of the way in which that fund can and should be spent, and there's a number of calls on that at the moment.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Peter.
How did the number of submissions this year compare to normal number of submissions on annual plans?
Can I invite Peter Ryan to talk to that point? Because I know he's got those details at his fingertips.
I don't know if I can give you a categorical record, but 500, 600, 700, 800 would be the range for an annual plan, and we've got 1,500 to 3,000 for a long-term plan. This is at the very low end of response.
So when was the last time that it was this low, 446 submissions? But you're saying this is a low turnout in terms of people making submissions, and a significant number of them seem to be generated off the tram. So if the tram submissions hadn't been received, then we could have even been down as low as 300. Yeah. I think that's quite interesting in terms of either the public's sense of exhaustion with input, but I also think that they heard our message about keeping the rates at 6.5. So I still feel that we haven't quite got there. Are there any other questions? Various other questions. All right. So, Phil.
I just wondered. It's not really a financial question per se. It's in relation to the Pioneer Learning Centre, and just that. Just some perhaps clarification, because the recommendation is that there be an investigation for an alternative provider, and I'm assuming that where it says to be based on criteria set by council, and in fact we could include community groups in that, including the parents who are currently involved.
Yeah, well, I mean, I sort of can possibly speak to that. There was obviously quite a lot of concern expressed by parents involved in the Pioneer Early Learning Centre, and their concerns seem to be around the provision of train staff. So I know that in the community sector, and as is the case with ours, it's 100%, teacher trained staff in our early learning centre and in the community sector. That is not necessarily the case in the private sector, and I think that was the idea behind it, was that we would actually set the criteria by which we would consider alternative service provision of this facility. So it wasn't closing it down, it was still the idea of alternative service provision, so somebody else to run it, but we would set the criteria. And if your question is, would we set those criteria in conjunction with the families that use that service? Absolutely, yeah. Yanni.
Just in regards to that centre, have staff worked with those parents? They had a number of immediate suggestions around things like promotion, marketing, council reducing its corporate overheads. Are you in a position, given that it'll take time to find an alternative provider, to work with them now to see about how you could actually maximise the efficiency there? Because there were some very tangible examples that they gave. They talked about marketing, promotion, things that we could do in the short term. Is anyone working with them around those solutions?
I don't have the answer to that, but I would assume that we would always be looking for best practice in an environment. But they wanted some certainty as to whether we were going to proceed down this track, and we have obligations under the Employment Relations Act as well, so we have to, go through a proper process to do this.
And then just the final question from me is around the indicative capital works program. My understanding is that we set that program because we attract DCs. So we charge DCs, and we're reintroducing them this year, which is really good. I still don't quite understand why they got taken out last year, but can we get a copy of, do we have an indicative capital works program for the next 8 years that we're charging DCs on? That's been amended based on submissions and changes and new information.
We will have an update to the 9-year plan, but it'll be very much a working model.
As you know, Councillor Johansson, the status of our capital program past the 3-year plan is a working model, more of an indication, because it's a non-approved capital program, hasn't been through the process whereby council has approved it. We do obviously have to work off a long-term model to manage financial strategy, borrowing, funding, etc. So it should be able to be done. However, it's not necessarily something that's predicated on development contributions. Development contributions would be one aspect in there, and it's probably more. It probably is more of an iterative loop, or as opposed to an input one way or the other.
What I'm really trying to understand is, there's actually a benefit to us if we put things in that 8-year plan now, because our DC's policy now includes the ability to charge for things like swimming pool, libraries, community infrastructure. So actually we need to know so things in Hallsville, for example, if they're out at a certain time, they may not be attracting the DCs that we would wish to attract. And so the DC's policy is based on a 9-year forward capital program, which is, I think, pretty fundamental to us knowing what we're charging DCs on. And I think the community would want to know as well. The developers certainly would want to know what they're being charged for.
Can I suggest I forward on to Mike Tilling for the DC policy, because that will be contained within that.
Capital program.
So is that required for the annual plan sign-off?
I would presume so, because things have changed, and Hallsville Library has moved to a different year, so it's pretty important to know what that indicative program is at some stage. And I would have thought the ability for us, if we wanted to bring projects forward or move them out, is quite critical to the money that we get, the assumptions. We need to know what assumptions are being made for charging DCs on what facilities for next year and the year after.